Hey fellas, let me ask you, this ever had a woman stuck in your head, on loop? She's long gone, but that laugh, that look she gave you, it's like gum on the bottom of your shoe, man. No matter how hard you scrape, it won't come off. And you ever wonder why some guys turn into bumbling idiots around a certain someone? Dude's usually sharp as a tack, then suddenly he's tripping over his words, spilling his drink like he's never held a cup before. Newsflash, she didn't pull some master move. It's not like she was blowing up your phone with good morning texts or dropping cheesy pickup lines to string you along. Crazy as it sounds, she didn't do anything. Didn't plot to make you like her, didn't scheme to lock you down, didn't even stick around longer than she wanted. She just existed. Laughed when something was funny, walked away when it was time, like a tree planted solid in its own dirtways with the wind, grows fruit when it's ready. No stress, no. But that doing nothing hit you like a rock in a still lake. Ripples just keep going. You can't explain it, but you're always thinking about her. Zoning out in meetings because the clouds look like that dress she wore. Pausing mid-sip of beer because you remember her rolling her eyes, saying it tasted like battery acid. It's weird, right? Not some crush you chased down. It's like a seed sprouted in your chest all on its own. No watering required. Come on, bro, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Admit it. Ha. If this vibe's hitting home, if you've ever been tangled up in that, why can't I shake this? Feeling you're in the right crew. Drop an "I feel that" in the comments. Let's squad up. Hit subscribe to L. Keep breaking down this stuff. The quiet little feelings that get stuck in your throat. Here's the thing, though maybe the problem ain't you. Maybe it's that you're trying too damn hard. Treating the whole thing like a glass vase. Tiptoeing around, scared to break it. But feelings, they're not fragile, they're like sand. Clench too tight, and it slips through your fingers faster. The women that stick with you, they're not perfect. Burn toast, get snappy over dumb stuff. Forget your birthday, cause she's too busy living her own life. Works late, hits up art shows with her friends, takes her dog to the park at sunset. She's not over here stressing, why hasn't he texted? Cause her world's already lit, up no empty spots waiting for you to fill 'em. That no effort thing, it's magnetic. You can breathe around her, no need to perform, no second guessing every word. She's the main character in her story, and you're just along for the ride. You never know what she'll do next, and that, way more gripping than any playbook. Sounds simple, but man, figuring this out takes some late nights staring at the ceiling. But trust me, you don't gotta earn a spot in someone's life by jumping through hoops. Just be you, laugh too loud, mess up, live like you mean it. That's more than enough. There is something undeniably, almost frighteningly, powerful about a woman who cannot be controlled. This isn't because she is rebellious or defiant for the sake of it. It's because she simply no longer fits inside anyone else's box. She has outgrown the need to be defined by another's expectations. She doesn't shrink herself to be more palatable or soften her truth to make others feel comfortable. She doesn't apologize for the space she occupies or the fire in her spirit. She shows up in her entirety whole, wild, and devastatingly honest. And that kind of authentic presence, that raw and unfiltered energy, shakes the very ground beneath a man's feet. It is an energy that he may not be able to name, but he feels it in his soul. It stirs something within him that he thought he had buried a long time ago, a part of himself that yearns for that same level of freedom and truth. Her stillness speaks louder than any words ever could, and her silence says more than a lifetime of pleasing ever will. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, a master of the soul's deep mysteries, once said that what we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. When a man encounters a woman who is living fully and unapologetically in her truth, a woman who no longer needs to be chosen to feel her own worth, it activates something dormant and profound within him. It's more than just attraction, it is a spiritual awakening. She doesn't just enter his life, she enters his psyche. She becomes a mirror, reflecting back to him all the parts of himself he has yet to meet, all the potential he has yet to embody. She doesn't demand his attention, but he finds he can't stop thinking about her. This is not because she was loud or overtly impressive. but because her quiet stillness held a mirror to everything he had lost, denied, or forgotten within himself. Maybe, just maybe, this is the real reason why some women haunt the hearts of men long after they have gone. It's not because they asked to be remembered. It is because they lived in a way that was simply impossible to forget. You do not have to beg for love. You do not have to twist yourself into a smaller, softer, more manageable version of yourself to be worthy of it. You do not have to be chosen. The sacred turning point in your journey comes the moment you stop trying to be the one he wants and you realize you are the one you've been waiting for. The moment you stop chasing a love that demands you diminish yourself, you become the one he can't forget. This transformation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about the sacred act of returning to yourself. It's about remembering the woman you were before you learned the art of pleasing, before you were taught to prove your worth, before you started earning affection as if it were a prize to be won. You are remembering the woman who once walked into a room not wondering if she was enough, but simply knowing, with every cell of her being, that she was the whole damn storm. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is the woman he will never be able to control. And that is exactly why he will fall. You may have once been the one who always tried. You learned how to soften your voice, how to be agreeable to keep the peace. You anticipated needs before they were spoken and gave more chances than you should have. You stayed in situations longer than was healthy for your soul, convincing yourself that love was synonymous with effort and that if it wasn't working, it was only because you weren't trying hard enough. You twisted yourself into shapes that didn't fit, just to hold on to someone who couldn't truly see you. Every time you gave your all, you watched the same heartbreaking story unfold, the same slow fade, the same unexplained distance, the same deep sense of confusion settling into your chest like a persistent fog. You found yourself asking, why do I always fall for men who lose interest the moment I give my all? It's a quiet torment, a cycle that can feel endless. You start strong, feeling the chemistry, the connection, the intoxicating possibility, and then, as soon as you begin to trust it, as soon as you lean in a little more, they retreat. They become colder, distracted, disconnected, and you are left wondering what changed, what you did wrong, what part of you suddenly became less lovable. So you try even harder. You double the affection, you over-explain, you apologize for being too much, too emotional, too available. You shrink, hoping it will make him stay, but it never works. And if you are truly honest with yourself, you know you have lived this pattern more than once. Different faces, same silence, same heartbreak. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This pattern is not just bad luck. This is not random. It is a reflection of something deeper, an old story that keeps playing out inside of you, hoping for a different ending. Somewhere along the way, you learned a lie. You learned that love must be earned, that being chosen requires a performance, that your value is measured in how much you can give. You were taught that if you loved someone enough, they would have to love you back. But that is the great illusion, because love is not a transaction, and the right man, the man who is truly ready for you, does not require a performance. He doesn't need you to prove your worth. He just needs you to be rooted in it. The ones who pull away when you give your heart are not rejecting you. They are rejecting the part of themselves that cannot receive real love. They are rejecting the part of them that is still chasing thrill, control, and distraction. It is not about you being too much. It is about them not being ready. But there is another truth, a harder one. Sometimes, the moment you begin to need him, the moment you reach for him, he stops reaching for you. This isn't because you did anything wrong. It's because what drew him in was never your effort. It was your wholeness, your autonomy, your quiet power. And when that began to fade, when you started to orbit around his attention, the gravity broke. So maybe it's time to ask a different question. Maybe he didn't fall for the version of you who gave everything. Maybe he fell for the version of you who didn't need to be loved, the one who was centered, mysterious, and grounded. The one who wasn't trying to be picked, but who simply showed up as herself. And maybe, just maybe, when you started trying to be loved, he no longer recognized you. Because your trying came from a place of fear, from a place of lack, from the shadowed belief that you are only worthy when you are wanted. But what if the truth is that your deepest power lies not in your effort, but in your essence? What if the part of you that needs to be chosen is the part that is still healing, and the part of you that knows she doesn't need to beg is the part that is finally waking up? This is not about blaming yourself. It is about understanding. It is about seeing the pattern for what it is, the loop that repeats until we name it, face it, and heal it. Because you don't have to chase anymore. You don't have to convince anyone of your worth. You were never too much. You were just with someone who couldn't hold what you carried. And the next time you feel that urge to try harder, to win him back, to prove your value, pause. Ask yourself, who am I doing this for? And who would I be if I stopped trying? That answer might just be the beginning of everything real, everything lasting, everything you have been searching for, not out there, but here, within. Carl Jung believed that deep within every man lies an image, an idealized feminine essence, shaped not by logic, but by the unconscious. He called it the anima. And it is not merely a psychological concept. It is a force, an ancient pattern that determines how a man connects, desires, and falls in love. The anima is not interested in predictability. It is not impressed by compliance or performance. What it seeks is resonance, depth, mysteria, glimpse of something it cannot name, but feels drawn to with every fiber of its being. This is why a man often falls hardest for the woman he cannot control. Not because she plays games or withholds affection, but because she touches something inside him he didn't even know was missing. She reminds him of something long forgotten, a part of himself buried beneath conditioning and ego. And in her presence, it begins to stir. She doesn't try to impress. She doesn't ask for permission to be herself. She doesn't adapt her essence to fit the room. And because of that, she becomes unforgettable. A woman who lives from her soul doesn't need to chase. And because of that, everything begins to chase her. This is not romantic idealism. It is energetic reality. Because feminine energy at its core is not submission. It is not performative gentleness. It is not the shell of politeness wrapped in fear of rejection. True feminine energy is presence. It is authenticity. It is the quiet refusal to betray oneself just to be accepted. We live in a world that has long misunderstood the feminine. It has told women to be nice, agreeable, pleasing. But none of those things are the same as feminine power. In fact, many of them are the opposite. Because when a woman disconnects from her truth to please others, her energy becomes diluted. She becomes readable, predictable, manageable. But when she returns to herself, when she begins to act from alignment rather than anxiety, her energy shifts. She stops performing and starts radiating. And that shift is not subtle. Men notice, not with their minds, but with something deeper. Because what draws a man in is not understanding her. It is the inability to fully define her. Men don't fall for women they understand. They fall for women who awaken something they forgot inside. This is the essence of anima projection. A man projects his unconscious feminine onto a woman who embodies qualities he hasn't yet integrated. She feels like a portal to something sacred, something powerful. And because he doesn't fully understand it, he can't stop thinking about it. The mistake many women make is believing they need to explain themselves, to justify, to be logical. But love at this level isn't born in logic, it's born in frequency. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the most beautiful woman in the room. You only need to be the most present with yourself. That presence, the one that comes from knowing who you are, from not abandoning yourself for the comfort of others, that is the energy he can't resist. Because it doesn't ask to be loved. It doesn't demand to be chosen. It simply exists. And that existence pulls everything toward it. The feminine that no longer begs to be seen becomes impossible to ignore. So, ask yourself, are you trying to be understood? Or are you brave enough to be deeply yourself, even when no one else gets it? Because your depth is not the problem, it's the portal. And when you begin to embody the truth of who you are, without softening your edges to make others comfortable, you become something rare. A mirror, a catalyst, a frequency that reminds him of the soul he forgot he had. This is not about seduction. It is not about strategy. It is about liberation. And the woman who is free within herself will always stir something uncontrollable in the man who has yet to free himself. That is the anima. That is why he falls. Not because you tried to be lovable, but because you dared to be real. Let's face the truth. Most people are too afraid to say out loud. The more you try to please him, the more invisible you become. You thought giving more would deepen the connection. You thought loving harder would make him see your worth. So you stayed up late to comfort him. You said yes when your body screamed no. You apologized for feelings that were never wrong. You overgave, over-explained, overextended, and in return, he gave you uncertainty, silence, confusion. You gave him everything, and he gave you confusion. Not clarity, not devotion, not presence. This isn't just personal, it's systemic. You were raised in a world that taught you to be pleasing before powerful, to smile when uncomfortable, to stay small in order to be safe. You were taught that your worth is determined by how much others approve of you. But here's the brutal irony. The very things you were taught would make you lovable: compliance, sweetness, predictability, the very things that make you forgettable. Because here's what no one told you. He doesn't crave what he can control. He's not drawn to your obedience. He's drawn to your unpredictability, to your wildness, to the part of you that doesn't bend just to keep the peace. That doesn't beg, that doesn't ask for permission to exist. You've been told your softness is your power. And yes, softness has beauty, but not when it's rooted in fear. Not when it's the result of shrinking, silencing, sacrificing who you are. Real power is not how nicely you speak, it's how deeply you know your own voice. Carl Jung once wrote, "The feminine that is most feared is the one that cannot be tamed." That fear is real, not just for men, but for society. Because a woman who is no longer looking for permission cannot be manipulated. She doesn't ask, "Am I good enough?" She asks, "Is this true for me?" She doesn't twist herself into palatable shapes. She brings her full self into the room and lets others adjust. And that kind of presence, it terrifies people who have only ever loved the version of you they could control. Here's the wake-up call. The man who leaves when you stop trying is not your loss. He is your mirror. He reveals the parts of you that still believe love must be earned. When you chase, you lose your gravity. When you overgive, you dilute your presence. When you make yourself small to keep someone, you end up losing the only thing that made you magnetic, your truth. You were never meant to be agreeable. You were meant to be alive. So if you feel like he pulled away when you showed your soul, understand this. He didn't walk away because you were too much. He walked away because your depth required a kind of presence he didn't have the capacity to meet. It's not your job to soften your brilliance to accommodate someone else's blindness. Let that sink in. The feminine that cannot be tamed is not chaotic. She is clear. She no longer bends for breadcrumbs. She no longer entertains maybes. She no longer asks how to be more likable. She asks how to be more aligned. And because of that, she becomes unforgettable. Not for what she gives, but for what she no longer needs to prove. So if you've been told that you need to try harder, love louder, wait longer, stop. You are not here to convince someone to see your worth. You are here to embody it, to live it, to let it speak in every room you enter without uttering a word. Because when you return to the core of who you are, something shifts. You stop chasing, you stop shrinking, you stop waiting for love to find you, and you realize it was always you. The one they couldn't hold, the one they couldn't tame, the one they couldn't forget. She walks into the room, and nothing looks different, but somehow everything changes. The air shifts. People pause, eyes follow. It's not beauty that stops them. It's not charm. It's something else. Something deeper. An unspoken energy that makes everyone present feel a little more aware, a little more alive. This is the power of a woman who no longer needs to be saved. She doesn't move with arrogance. She moves with clarity. She's not cold. She's simply self-contained. And that's where the magnetism begins. Because when a woman no longer looks outward for validation, she becomes unshakable. And that is what makes her irresistible. Carl Jung captured this essence when he said, "It is not her words, but her soul's frequency." This frequency is not taught, it's not performed, it's remembered. It awakens when a woman finally stops asking, "What do they want from me?" and starts asking, "What do I want from myself?" It awakens when she stops chasing love and starts living from love. It awakens when she realizes her strength isn't in how much she can give, but in how deeply she can stay true. We've been sold a lie, that being wanted is the goal, that being chosen is the reward, that our worth is confirmed by someone else's attention. But what if the goal was never to be chosen? What if the real power was to become someone who no longer needs to be? Because the woman who cannot be controlled is the one who is truly free. And freedom is magnetic. There is a myth that a woman like this is hard to love, that she is distant, cold, intimidating. But none of that is true. She is not distant, she is discerning. She is not cold, she is rooted. She is not intimidating, she simply refuses to shrink. She doesn't raise her voice to be heard. Her silence speaks volumes. She doesn't explain herself. Her energy does that for her. When you are in her presence, you feel something shift, not because she's trying to impress, but because she's deeply present with herself, with the moment, with everything that matters. She doesn't seek attention, but attention finds her, because presence is the new seduction, and no amount of strategy can replicate the gravity of someone who has come home to herself. This is not about rejection, this is about return, a return to wholeness, to the self you were before you were taught to perform, before you were told to be sweet, soft, small, before you learned to trade truth for acceptance. Now you remember. You remember the woman who doesn't need tactics, who doesn't need to chase, who doesn't ask for approval, because she is not performing anymore, she is becoming. And in that becoming, she stops being controllable, because to be uncontrollable is not to be rebellious, it is to be true. True to your rhythms, true to your boundaries, true to your voice, true to your soul's frequency. And that is the energy he cannot forget. That is what makes a man pause, reflect, and feel something he can't name. Not desire, not lust. Something older, something sacred. He doesn't understand why he's drawn to her. He only knows that he is. Because she reminds him of something lost in himself, a truth he has yet to meet, a wholeness he has yet to embody. That's not seduction, that's remembrance. And it only happens in the presence of someone who is fully themselves. So if you've been told to dim your light, to soften your power, to wait for permission, stop. You don't need permission to be magnetic, you just need to be real. Because the woman who is real, who is whole, who is no longer seeking a savior, becomes the kind of woman the world cannot ignore. And she doesn't have to chase anything, because everything she needs rises to meet her. There is a quiet kind of power in a woman who has been through the fire and no longer fears being alone, not because she gave up on love, but because she stopped abandoning herself to receive it. She is no longer the woman who waits to be chosen, she chooses herself, and that choice changes everything. When she no longer needs to be chosen, she becomes unforgettable. Carl Jung spoke of this transformation as individuation, the process of becoming whole, of facing what was hidden, of integrating the parts of ourselves we once denied, feared, or rejected. In Jungian psychology, this hidden territory is known as the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is not darkness for the sake of darkness. It is the collection of everything you were told not to be, everything you pushed away to be accepted, everything you learned to fear in yourself. Your anger, your power, your desire, your sadness, your intensity, your boundaries. For many women, the shadow holds all the parts of their identity that were labeled too much, too emotional, too assertive, too wild. So they buried it. They became agreeable, manageable, lovable, in ways the world approved of. But love earned through self-erasure is not love, it is survival. And at some point, survival begins to feel like suffocation. That's when the journey begins, the journey inward, the return to the self, the descent into the shadow, not to be consumed by it, but to reclaim it. Because the truth is, no one is more radiant than a woman who has met her own darkness and refused to be ashamed of it. She doesn't pretend to be light all the time. She knows her storms, she knows her edges, and instead of hiding them, she honors them. She no longer needs to be perfect, she needs to be whole. This shift is subtle, but it is profound. She moves from neediness to presence, from chasing to choosing, from seeking approval to embodying her own authority. This is the essence of feminine maturity. Not a woman who knows everything, but a woman who is no longer afraid of what she knows. She does not collapse into silence to keep the peace. She does not shrink in the presence of a man to feel protected. She does not perform softness to avoid being called difficult. She simply is, and because of that, she disrupts every dynamic built on insecurity. She becomes a mirror, showing others not what they want to see, but what they have yet to face. For some, that is terrifying. For others, that is the most magnetic thing they've ever encountered. Because true feminine presence is not about being pleasing, it's about being real. It's the difference between "please love me" and "this is who I am." It's the shift from fear to freedom. And the woman who has walked through this transformation no longer fits inside traditional expectations. She doesn't chase, she attracts. Not through tactics, but through essence. Not through manipulation, but through authenticity. Carl Jung wrote that the most powerful force in the psyche is the integration of the shadow. When a woman reclaims what she once hid, she becomes more than beautiful, she becomes whole. And wholeness is irresistible because it holds both softness and strength, tenderness and fire, stillness and wildness. She does not need to be either, or she can be all. That is the woman a man cannot control, cannot forget, and often cannot explain, because she does not awaken his desires. She awakens his depth. She touches not the surface, but the soul. And perhaps that is why the woman who chooses herself first, who welcomes her shadow, who lives from her center, does not need to be loud to be heard or visible to be felt. She simply is. And in being fully herself, she invites others to do the same. Not through demand, but through presence. Not through effort, but through being. That is what it means to be uncontrollable. That is what it means to be whole. She walks slowly down the street, and no one is waiting for her. No one is calling her name. Yet, there is no sense of emptiness in her step, no rush to arrive anywhere. She is not lonely. She is not searching. She is simply walking, present, whole, enough. There is a kind of silence around her that does not speak of absence, but of fullness, the kind of fullness that comes not from having everything, but from no longer needing anything to feel complete. She does not glance sideways wondering who is watching. She does not fix her posture hoping to be seen. She does not rehearse conversations in her mind. She walks with the calm certainty of someone who no longer performs her worth. And in that quiet presence, there is power. Your value was never in what you could give. It is in who you are when you give nothing at all. This is the shift, the sacred turning point. When the woman who once chased love, validation, attention, and approval suddenly realizes that the thing she was looking for was never outside of her, it was always waiting within. Carl Jung wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." And awakening is not a loud process. It is not a sudden burst of clarity. It is a soft unraveling, a remembering, a return. The return to the self you were before the world told you who to be, before you learned to trade truth for affection, before you believed you had to earn love through effort and sacrifice. Now, you remember that love was never something to be won. It was something to be lived, not out there, but here, in you, through you. When you stop chasing, when you stop performing, when you stop trying to fit someone else's vision of who you should be, you begin to see clearly. You begin to feel what real alignment is. It is not the absence of longing, it is the presence of trust. Trust that you are not behind, not broken, not too much, or not enough. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. And from this place, you begin to live, not from fear, but from freedom. You speak less, but say more. You need less, but feel more. You do less, but become more. Because your energy no longer leaks in 1,000 directions. It is centered, rooted, intact, and that is when everything starts to change. Not because you tried harder, but because you stopped trying to be anything other than yourself. You wake up, not to a new version of yourself, but to the original one, the one who knew how to feel, how to trust, how to simply be. And from that space, your relationships change, your choices change, your boundaries become clearer, your silence becomes sacred, your presence becomes a gift, not a negotiation. You stop asking, "Am I lovable?" and start asking, "Is this love true to me?" You stop needing to be needed. You start loving from overflow, not depletion. You no longer lose yourself in someone else's story. You write your own. This is not the end of love. It is the beginning of true love that does not demand you shrink. Love that does not fear your depth. Love that meets you where you are, because you are already there. This is the kind of transformation that cannot be undone, because once you taste the freedom of not needing to be chosen, you will never again settle for being tolerated. Once you remember who you are without the layers of performance and pain, you will never again betray yourself to belong. You will walk like that woman, quiet, present, full. Not because she has it all figured out, but because she no longer needs to. Her peace does not come from certainty. It comes from self-honesty. She knows where she ends and where others begin. She does not confuse attention for affection. She does not confuse presence with possession. She is not cold. She is clear. She is not waiting. She is here. And in her stillness, in her truth, in her undeniable presence, she becomes a beacon. Not because she tried, but because she stopped trying. And from that place, everything she truly desires begins to find its way to her. Not because she chased it, but because she became it.